It didn't come from the palace. It didn't come from the press. It came from someone who had once stood quietly in the background, watching, listening, remembering. Now, Princess Diana's voice, long thought buried with her legacy, is echoing again through a revelation no one expected. And at the center of it all stands a young Prince William, unaware of the truth that was always meant for him. Before we go deeper into what this really means for the royal family, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss a single update. For years, the story remained locked away in silence, buried beneath routine, protocol, and the carefully controlled narratives of palace life. The woman at the center of this storm was never meant to be seen as a source of disruption. She was simply there, present during the quietest hours, the most unguarded moments, when the weight of royal life slipped just enough for honesty to breathe. And now, after decades of absence, she has stepped forward with something that feels less like a memory and more like a warning that was never delivered in time. Reports suggest that her recollections are not vague impressions or fragmented emotions, but specific conversations, private, deeply personal exchanges with Diana that revolved around a subject the monarchy has always treated as untouchable: succession. What makes this revelation even more unsettling is not just what was said, but when it was said. According to those familiar with the inner workings of royal households, timing is never accidental. And yet, this disclosure arrives at a moment when the monarchy already feels strained, when every decision, every silence, every subtle shift in behavior is being examined more closely than ever before. Insiders whisper that the palace was caught off guard, not because of the existence of these conversations, but because of the decision to bring them into the light now. That alone raises questions no one inside the institution seems eager to answer. Meanwhile, Prince William finds himself at the center of something he never asked to revisit. Various interpretations suggest he was not prepared for this, blindsided not by the idea that his mother had concerns, but by the possibility that those concerns were far more profound than anyone had ever allowed him to understand. There is a difference between remembering a mother's love and confronting the hidden truths she may have carried, and this revelation appears to blur that line in ways that are difficult to ignore. The emotional weight of it lingers, quietly but persistently, shaping the atmosphere behind palace walls. And yet, the palace has chosen silence. No denial, no confirmation, no attempt to redirect the narrative, just a void where answers should be. In the world of the monarchy, that kind of silence is never empty. It is deliberate, it is controlled, and perhaps most telling of all, it is often the clearest signal that something far more complicated is unfolding beneath the surface. Early whispers from media insiders suggest that this is only the beginning, that what has been revealed so far barely scratches the surface of a much larger story waiting to be uncovered. Because what is emerging here does not feel like a simple recollection of the past. It feels like a thread being pulled, slowly unraveling something that has been tightly woven for generations. A truth that was never meant to surface, now finding its way into the open through the most unexpected voice. And as that truth begins to take shape, one question grows louder with every passing moment: what exactly did Diana know, and why was it kept hidden for so long? But what Diana reportedly revealed wasn't just emotional, it hinted at a truth about succession that could reshape everything the monarchy stands for. Behind nursery doors and quiet corridors, conversations unfolded that were never meant to leave the room. But decades later, fragments of those moments are resurfacing, each one carrying the weight of something far bigger than childhood memories. What makes these revelations so unsettling is not just their content, but their intimacy. This was not a distant observer or a passing witness. This was someone who stood within arm's reach of both Princess Diana and a young Prince William during some of the most unguarded moments of their lives. According to those familiar with the structure of royal households, individuals in such positions often become silent keepers of truths that never reach official records. And in this case, it is now being suggested that those truths were not trivial. They were layered, emotional, and, perhaps most strikingly, intentional. Reports suggest that Diana did not speak carelessly. Every word carried a sense of purpose, as though she was trying to prepare her son for something he could not yet understand. These were not formal lessons about duty or rehearsed explanations of royal expectations. Instead, they were quiet conversations, softly delivered, yet deeply charged, where themes of pressure, destiny, and isolation surfaced again and again. Insiders whisper that Diana would often return to the same idea, subtly reinforcing it over time, as if she believed that repetition was the only way to ensure the message would eventually take hold. At the center of these conversations was the question of succession, not in the rigid, ceremonial sense the public sees, but in a far more human, almost vulnerable light. It is now being claimed that Diana expressed concerns about how fixed and unforgiving the system truly was, not as an act of defiance, but as a reflection of what she herself had experienced. Those familiar with her perspective suggest she saw the monarchy not just as an institution, but as a structure that demanded sacrifice in ways that were rarely acknowledged openly. And in those quiet exchanges, she may have been trying to bridge the gap between what William was being told and what she believed he would eventually face. There are also whispers of something even more deliberate, references to what some have described as prepared truths. The phrase itself carries an almost haunting implication, as if Diana knew that certain realities would only reveal themselves over time, and that her son would need to be ready when they did. Various interpretations suggest these were not warnings meant to alarm, but rather to steady him, to give him something solid to hold on to when the weight of expectation became unavoidable. Yet the very existence of such conversations raises an uncomfortable question. What truths needed preparing for in the first place? What emerges from these accounts is not the image of a rebellious figure challenging the monarchy, but of a mother navigating its complexities with a quiet sense of urgency. The emotional undertone is unmistakable. There is concern, yes, but also a kind of restrained resolve, a determination to ensure that her son would not face the future blindly. And in doing so, Diana appears to have revealed something deeper about how she viewed the institution itself. Not as unbreakable, not as beyond question, but as something far more fragile than it appeared on the surface. And as these fragments continue to surface, they begin to form a pattern that is difficult to ignore. A pattern that suggests Diana's perspective was not shaped by momentary frustration, but by a growing awareness of the pressures and contradictions built into the very fabric of royal life. It is a perspective that, until now, has remained largely hidden, quietly overshadowed by the more visible narratives that followed her passing. But with each new detail, that hidden layer becomes harder to dismiss. Because if these conversations were as intentional as they now seem, then they were never meant to stay buried forever. They were meant to resurface at the right moment, under the right circumstances, when their meaning could no longer be ignored. And that moment, it appears, may finally have arrived. But these weren't just reflections of a worried mother, they were warnings about a system that Diana believed was far more fragile than it appeared. It wasn't anger, it wasn't defiance. According to the revelation, it was something quieter and far more unsettling. A mother trying to prepare her son for a reality she believed no one else would dare explain. What is now being suggested does not paint Princess Diana as someone resisting the monarchy in open conflict. Instead, it reveals a far more complex emotional landscape, one shaped by experience, by disappointment, and by a deep understanding of what the crown truly demands. Reports suggest that in those private conversations, she spoke not about titles or ceremonies, but about the invisible cost of carrying them, the emotional toll, the quiet sacrifices. The way the institution could slowly reshape a person from within, until duty and identity became almost impossible to separate. For a young Prince William, these ideas would not have been easy to grasp at the time, and yet, insiders whisper that Diana did not simplify them. She did not shield him with comforting illusions. Instead, she allowed the weight of those truths to exist in the room, even if he could not fully understand them yet. There is something profoundly striking about that approach, a refusal to lie, even when the truth carried a heaviness that no child should have to bear. It suggests she believed that understanding, even delayed understanding, was better than ignorance. At the heart of these conversations was a recurring theme: isolation. Not the kind that comes from being physically alone, but the deeper, more complex isolation that comes from living within a system where every move is observed, every word measured, every relationship influenced by something larger than personal choice. Diana, it is now being claimed, tried to express how that kind of isolation could grow quietly over time, becoming a constant presence rather than a passing feeling. And in doing so, she may have been offering her son a glimpse into a future that few ever acknowledge openly. There are also suggestions that she hinted at something even more sensitive, that the path of succession, as it is publicly understood, is not as simple as it appears. Not in a way that challenges its legitimacy, but in a way that exposes its emotional complexity, the expectations, the unspoken rules, the quiet pressures that shape decisions long before they are ever announced. Various interpretations of these conversations describe Diana as someone who saw those layers clearly and chose, in her own way, to prepare William for them, not with rebellion, but with awareness. And yet, perhaps the most haunting element of all is the idea that these truths were never meant to be fully understood in the moment, that they were meant to linger, to resurface later, when experience would finally give them meaning. It creates a sense that William has been carrying something with him for years without even realizing it, an emotional imprint left behind by words that only now are beginning to take shape. The burden of that realization, insiders suggest, is not just personal. It is deeply connected to his role, his future, and the expectations that continue to surround him. Because if these revelations hold even a fragment of truth, then they suggest that Diana was not simply reacting to her circumstances, she was anticipating what was to come. She was trying to bridge the gap between what the monarchy presents to the world and what it quietly demands behind closed doors. And in doing so, she may have left behind something far more powerful than a warning. She may have left behind a perspective that challenges how the entire system is understood. And as that perspective begins to emerge, it carries with it a quiet but undeniable tension. A sense that something long buried is finally being brought into the light, not in a way that explodes into scandal, but in a way that slowly, steadily reshapes the narrative. Because the most profound truths are rarely the loudest ones. They are the ones that linger, that wait, that reveal themselves only when the time is right. And if those warnings were real, then the question becomes unavoidable: what exactly was Diana trying to protect William from? For decades, the line of succession has been treated as unquestionable, fixed, unshakable, absolute. But what if, behind the scenes, even Princess Diana believed there were truths about it that couldn't be spoken aloud? The public has always been presented with a version of the monarchy that feels immovable, almost timeless in its certainty, a clear order, a defined path, a structure that appears immune to doubt. From an early age, Prince William was positioned within that structure with a clarity that left no room for ambiguity. He was the future, the next step in a line that stretched back through generations, each link reinforcing the idea that succession was not just a process, it was a promise. But what now begins to surface challenges that very perception, not by dismantling it, but by revealing the emotional and psychological layers that have always existed beneath its polished surface. Reports suggest that Diana's perspective was shaped by what she witnessed firsthand, not just as a member of the royal family, but as someone who experienced the inner tensions that rarely reach public view. There are now subtle but persistent claims that she questioned not the legitimacy of succession itself, but the way it was experienced by those bound to it. The pressure, the expectations, the quiet understanding that personal choice often becomes secondary to institutional necessity. These were not ideas openly discussed, but rather concerns that existed in the background, forming a kind of silent awareness that only those closest to the system could truly feel. Insiders whisper that Diana may have sensed contradictions within the structure, moments where tradition and reality did not align as seamlessly as they appeared from the outside. Not in a way that threatened the monarchy's foundation, but in a way that exposed its human cost. Those interpretations suggest she saw succession not as a straight, unbroken line, but as something far more complex, shaped by unseen forces, internal negotiations, and emotional compromises that were never acknowledged publicly. And if that perspective is even partially accurate, it introduces a layer of uncertainty that the monarchy has spent decades trying to avoid. What makes this even more provocative is how these revelations interact with the present. Because the palace has chosen not to respond, not to clarify, not to even acknowledge the growing conversation. And in a system where communication is carefully controlled, that silence does not calm speculation, it amplifies it. Various interpretations of this silence describe it as strategic, perhaps even necessary, but it also creates space for questions that would otherwise remain unasked. Questions about whether there have always been internal tensions that were simply never allowed to surface. As these ideas begin to circulate more widely, public curiosity is shifting. It is no longer focused solely on what happened in the past, but on what those past experiences might reveal about the present structure of the monarchy. People are beginning to look beyond the ceremonial image, searching for the deeper dynamics that shape decisions, relationships, and ultimately, the future of the institution itself. And with that shift comes a growing sense that what was once considered untouchable may not be as beyond question as it once seemed. Because if Diana truly held these concerns, even quietly, even privately, then it suggests that the narrative surrounding succession has always been more layered than it appears. That beneath the certainty lies a complexity that cannot be easily explained, only gradually understood. And as that understanding begins to take form, it carries with it a quiet but undeniable tension, one that extends far beyond historical reflection and into the current moment. But as these questions grow louder, it's not just history being revisited, it's the present that's starting to feel the pressure. Inside the palace, the reaction wasn't explosive, it was something far more telling: silence. The kind of silence that speaks louder than any official statement ever could. In the immediate aftermath of the revelations, there were no dramatic denials, no urgent attempts to seize control of the narrative. Instead, reports suggest a quiet recalibration behind closed doors, where every word spoken was measured, every response carefully weighed. At the center of that stillness stood Prince William, a figure now navigating something far more complex than public scrutiny. Insiders whisper that he was caught off guard not by the idea that his mother had private concerns, but by the depth and clarity with which those concerns are now being presented. It is one thing to carry memories. It is another to confront the possibility that those memories were only fragments of a much larger truth. Various interpretations describe a series of private meetings unfolding quietly within the palace, away from public attention. These were not gatherings meant to create headlines or deliver immediate answers. They were deliberate, restrained, almost introspective. Conversations centered not just on how to respond externally, but on how to process what this revelation meant internally. Because this was not merely a matter of reputation or public image, it was deeply personal, tied to the legacy of Princess Diana and the emotional imprint she left behind. The weight of that legacy is difficult to overstate. Diana's presence has always existed in a space that is both deeply personal and profoundly public, and now, those two dimensions are colliding once again. For William, this creates a tension that cannot be easily resolved. On one side, there is the private bond between a mother and her son, filled with moments that belong only to them. On the other, there is the institution he represents, an institution that depends on stability, continuity, and the careful preservation of its narrative. Balancing those two realities is not just challenging, it is defining. And within that balance, there is also the presence of Catherine, Princess of Wales, whose role, according to those familiar with the situation, has been one of quiet support. Not in a way that draws attention, but in a way that reinforces stability when everything else feels uncertain. Insiders suggest she has remained close, offering a steady presence as William navigates the emotional and institutional weight of what is unfolding. It is a reminder that while the monarchy often appears as a singular entity, its strength is frequently shaped by these quieter, less visible dynamics. Yet beneath that outward composure lies an internal conflict that cannot be ignored. The contrast between legacy and revelation is becoming increasingly difficult to reconcile. If these claims hold any truth, they challenge not just the past, but the framework through which the present is understood. And for William, that creates a deeply personal dilemma: how to honor his mother's voice while upholding the responsibilities that define his role. It is not a question with a clear answer, and perhaps that is what makes the silence so significant. Because silence in this context is not absence, it is presence. It is the space where decisions are forming, where emotions are being processed, where the weight of history is being quietly acknowledged. And as that silence continues, it becomes clear that this moment is not passing quickly. It is settling in, reshaping perspectives, forcing a deeper reflection that extends far beyond immediate reaction. But while William processes what this could mean for him personally, the wider implications for the monarchy are becoming impossible to ignore. No denial, no confirmation, just silence. And in the world of the monarchy, silence is rarely empty, it's strategic. The absence of a response from the palace has not calmed the situation, it has intensified it. In an institution where every statement is carefully measured and every word carries weight, choosing not to speak at all becomes a statement in itself. Reports suggest that officials have deliberately stepped back, refusing to validate or dismiss the claims surrounding Princess Diana and the alleged conversations that are now resurfacing. But instead of closing the narrative, that decision has opened the door to something far more unpredictable. It has allowed speculation to grow unchecked, filling the silence with questions that demand answers. Media outlets, sensing the significance of the moment, have moved quickly to amplify the mystery. Various interpretations are being circulated, each one adding another layer to an already complex story. Some suggest the claims are being overstated, shaped by time and memory into something more dramatic than originally intended. Others argue the opposite, that what is being revealed now may only represent a fraction of a much deeper truth. And in the absence of official clarification, both perspectives are gaining traction simultaneously, creating a narrative that feels both uncertain and impossible to ignore. Experts have also entered the conversation, though even their analyses remain divided. Some focus on credibility, questioning the reliability of long-delayed accounts and the motivations behind their release. Others shift the focus to impact, arguing that regardless of their origin, these revelations are already influencing how the monarchy is perceived. Because perception, in this context, is not a secondary concern, it is central to the institution's stability. And as these discussions unfold, it becomes increasingly clear that this is no longer just a story about the past. It is a story shaping the present. The public, meanwhile, finds itself caught between skepticism and belief. There are those who view the claims with caution, aware of how easily narratives can evolve over time. But there are also those who feel a strong connection to Diana's legacy, who see these revelations as an extension of a voice that was never fully heard. That divide is growing, not shrinking, as more details emerge. And with each passing moment, the conversation becomes less about whether the claims are true and more about what they reveal about the monarchy, about its inner workings, and about the truths it may have chosen to keep hidden. What makes the timing of all this even more significant is how it aligns with broader tensions already surrounding the royal family. Insiders whisper that the institution is navigating a period of quiet strain, where internal dynamics are shifting in ways that are not immediately visible to the public. In that context, the emergence of these claims does not feel isolated. It feels connected, part of a larger pattern that is only now beginning to take shape. And that connection is what gives the story its momentum, pushing it beyond speculation and into something far more consequential. Because silence, when it persists, does not protect, it provokes. It invites scrutiny. It encourages deeper investigation. And as the pressure for transparency continues to build, the palace's refusal to engage is becoming harder to sustain without consequence. The longer the silence holds, the more it begins to suggest that there is something worth protecting, something that cannot be easily explained away. And as speculation spreads, one question begins to dominate every conversation. Why was this truth hidden for so long? Even decades after her passing, Diana's presence continues to shape the monarchy in ways no one can control. And now, her words, if true, may be doing it again. There are few figures in modern history whose influence has endured with such quiet intensity as Princess Diana. Time has passed, generations have shifted, and yet her presence remains woven into the emotional fabric of the monarchy. Not as a distant memory, but as a living force that continues to shape perception, expectation, and, perhaps most significantly, accountability. Reports suggest that her legacy has never truly faded. It has simply evolved, adapting to each new chapter of royal life, resurfacing in moments when the institution appears most vulnerable. What makes this moment different is not just the resurfacing of her voice, but the nature of what that voice is said to carry. Diana's relationship with the monarchy was never simple. It was layered, filled with both devotion and conflict, loyalty and isolation. Insiders have long described her as someone who understood the institution from the inside out, who experienced both its power and its limitations, in ways that few others ever have. That duality, being both part of the system and quietly questioning it, has become central to how she is remembered. And now, it appears to be central to how her legacy is being reinterpreted. For the public, that legacy has always held a deeply emotional resonance. Diana was not just a royal figure, She became a symbol of vulnerability within an institution defined by restraint. She represented a different kind of connection, one that felt personal rather than distant, human rather than ceremonial. That connection has not weakened over time. If anything, it has grown stronger, reinforced by the sense that her story was never fully told. And it is that unfinished narrative that gives these current revelations their power. Because when Diana's voice resurfaces even indirectly, it carries with it a sense of unfinished truth. Various interpretations suggest that what is being revealed now is not new, but rather a continuation of something that was always there, waiting to be understood in a different context. Her perspective, shaped by experience and emotion, stands in contrast to the traditional image of the monarchy as unchanging and unquestionable. It introduces nuance, complexity, and, perhaps most importantly, doubt. That doubt does not dismantle the institution, but it challenges the way it is perceived. It forces a reconsideration of what has been accepted without question, of what has been presented as fixed and absolute. And in doing so, it creates a space where new conversations can emerge. Conversations that are not bound by tradition alone, but influenced by the emotional truths that Diana is said to have carried. At the same time, there is a growing recognition that her influence extends beyond memory. It exists in the way the monarchy responds to pressure, in the way it navigates public perception, and in the way figures like Prince William continue to balance personal identity with institutional responsibility. Diana's legacy, in this sense, is not confined to the past. It is active, shaping decisions, influencing perspectives, and, perhaps most significantly, challenging the boundaries of what can and cannot be said. And that is what makes this moment so powerful. It is not just about revisiting Diana's story, it is about understanding how that story continues to unfold. Because if her truth was never fully told, then what is emerging now may only be the beginning of a much larger revelation, one that does not simply add to her legacy, but transforms it. But this isn't just about Diana anymore, it's about what her legacy is forcing the monarchy to confront today. What started as a quiet revelation has now become something far bigger, a question mark hanging over the very foundation of the monarchy itself. At first, it was easy to dismiss, a voice from the past, a memory resurfacing after years of silence. But as the narrative unfolded, as each detail began to connect with the next, it became clear that this was not something that would simply fade away. Reports suggest that the Nanny's claims have already begun to reshape the conversation surrounding Princess Diana, not by introducing something entirely new, but by reframing what people thought they already understood. And that shift, subtle at first, is now growing into something far more significant. Because the impact of this revelation is not confined to a single moment or a single reaction, it stretches forward into the future of the monarchy itself. Various interpretations suggest that public perception is beginning to evolve, moving away from unquestioned acceptance toward a more reflective, more inquisitive stance. People are no longer just observing the institution, they are examining it, questioning it, trying to understand the layers that exist beneath its carefully maintained image. And once that shift begins, it is difficult to reverse. For Prince William, the weight of this moment is deeply personal. It is not just about legacy or public perception, it is about identity. About reconciling the image of his mother that has been preserved for the world with the possibility that there were truths she carried that were never fully shared. Insiders whisper that this creates a quiet but powerful tension, one that does not erupt into visible conflict, but instead lingers beneath the surface, shaping thoughts, influencing decisions, and altering perspectives in ways that are not immediately visible. The emotional toll of that process cannot be easily measured, but it is impossible to ignore. And within the wider family, that tension extends outward. Because the monarchy does not exist in isolation, it is built on relationships, on shared understanding, on a collective commitment to tradition. When something challenges that foundation, even subtly, it forces a recalibration, a reassessment of what is known, what is assumed, and what might still be hidden. The balance between tradition and truth becomes more fragile, more difficult to maintain, as new questions continue to emerge. What makes this moment particularly unsettling is the uncertainty that surrounds it. There is no clear resolution, no definitive answer that brings the narrative to a close. Instead, there is a growing sense that this is only the beginning, that what has been revealed so far may lead to further disclosures, further reflections, further shifts in understanding. And with that comes a question that lingers in the background, unanswered but persistent. Will the full story ever truly be known? Because the monarchy now finds itself at a crossroads, not in a dramatic, visible sense, but in a quieter, more profound way. A moment where it must navigate the tension between preserving its image and confronting the complexities that lie beneath it. A moment where silence is no longer as protective as it once was, and where the past is no longer as distant as it once seemed. The path forward is not yet clear, but the pressure to define it is growing with each passing day. And as this story continues to unfold, it becomes increasingly evident that its significance goes beyond any single claim or single revelation. It touches something deeper, something foundational. The idea that even within the most established institutions, there are truths that remain hidden, waiting for the right moment to surface. And when they do not simply add to the narrative. They transform it. Because in the end, this was never just about what Diana said, it's about what the truth might finally force the world to see. Thanks for watching. Please don't forget to like and subscribe, and we will see you in next one.